In Phoenix, a social work graduate was about to uncover a devastating family secret. What started as preparing an ancestry gift took a shocking turn when DNA results revealed her sister was actually her half-aunt. Maya Rodriguez wasn't your typical student. For years, she had endured inexplicable cruelty from Carmen, known for seeking truth in broken families while missing it in her own. When she discovered the genetic evidence, she had no idea she was walking into decades of lies. Maya's pursuit of answers would lead to her family's complete transformation. What began as an anniversary surprise became a journey toward authentic relationships built on truth rather than comfortable deception. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya Rodriguez knelt on her apartment's hardwood floor, surrounded by silver wrapping paper and scattered ribbon pieces, meticulously preparing what she believed would be a transformative gift. The DNA ancestry kit felt weighty in her hands, not just physically but symbolically. 25 years of her parents' marriage deserved recognition, and perhaps this exploration into their family roots would finally create the connection she'd yearned for throughout her life. Afternoon sunlight filtered through her modest Phoenix apartment windows, casting dancing shadows across the wrapping materials. Maya had deliberately chosen understated silver paper paired with navy ribbon that reminded her of Roberto's favorite weekend shirt. She'd mentally rehearsed her gift presentation multiple times, envisioning her parents' excitement as they discovered their heritage together, imagining deeper conversations that transcended their usual superficial exchanges about work and weather patterns. Her phone chimed with David's encouraging message, "Tonight's the night. You've got this. They're fortunate to have you." His words brought a genuine smile. David possessed an intuitive understanding of her that her biological family somehow lacked. As fellow social work graduate students, they'd dissected numerous family dynamics in their coursework, yet Maya's own household remained mysteriously resistant to analysis. Securing the final piece of tape, Maya settled against her couch, allowing anticipation to wash over her. Tonight promised to be different. Instead of sitting silently while Carmen dominated conversations with professional accomplishments or cutting commentary, Maya would contribute something genuinely meaningful to their family narrative. The mere thought of Carmen triggered familiar stomach knots. Her older sister possessed undeniable intelligence and razor-sharp wit, but wielded both weapons specifically against Maya with confusing precision. While typical siblings might engage in playful competition or harmless teasing, Carmen's approach felt deliberately destructive, calculated to undermine rather than simply provoke. Despite Maya's extensive therapeutic training and academic knowledge of family systems, Carmen's behavior remained an anomaly that defied professional explanation. Hours later, Maya stood in her childhood home's entrance hall, the precious gifts secured in her purse, absorbing the comforting sounds of anniversary dinner preparations. Elena's melodic voice drifted from the kitchen as she orchestrated the evening's meal, while Roberto's hearty laughter resonated from the living room where he likely entertained someone with tales of his recent business ventures. The house radiated familiar warmth, comfortable, memory-laden, representative of family success, yet Maya perpetually felt more like a welcomed guest than a true inhabitant. "Maya has arrived," Elena announced, briefly abandoning her kitchen duties to offer a warm but hurried embrace before returning to monitor the roast. "Carmen and David should arrive momentarily. Your father's been anticipating the celebration all week." Carmen materialized at exactly 6:30, her characteristic punctuality accompanied by the authoritative click of expensive heels against hardwood. She appeared flawless in a sophisticated black dress that likely exceeded Maya's monthly living expenses, her dark hair sculpted into an elegant chignon that accentuated her angular features. David followed quietly behind, managing a subtle supportive smile and brief hand squeeze when Carmen's attention was elsewhere. "Apologies for the delay," Carmen declared, despite arriving precisely on schedule. "A client emergency demanded immediate attention. Some individuals failed to comprehend that successful marketing campaigns require meticulous oversight." She deliberately found Maya delivering a subtle but pointed criticism.
Not everyone enjoys the luxury of pursuing emotionally fulfilling careers that disregard financial practicality.
The barbed comment lingered momentarily before Roberto deflected with nervous laughter. Carmen, show kindness to your sister. Maya's contributing valuable work to society. His defense sounded rehearsed and unconvincing, and Maya noticed his swift topic change toward Carmen's latest professional achievements. Dinner unfolded predictably. Elena's culinary perfection, Roberto's business updates, Carmen's career triumphs, and Maya's conversational attempts being either overlooked or politely redirected. When Maya mentioned her approaching thesis defense on family systems therapy, Carmen struck with calculated cruelty. Playing rescuer to dysfunctional families while remaining blind to dysfunction within your own, Carmen observed with hollow laughter. The irony is almost artistic, studying healthy family relationships while completely missing the pathology surrounding you. The verbal assault struck Maya like a physical blow, not for its cleverness, but for the malicious intent behind it. This transcended normal sibling dynamics. This was purposeful humiliation. Maya's face flushed as she scanned the table, desperately hoping someone would intervene, would recognize Carmen's boundary violation. Roberto shifted uncomfortably. "Carmen, that's inappropriate. We're celebrating tonight." "Please, Dad. Maya understands I'm providing necessary perspective. Someone must." Carmen's expression remained coldly satisfied. If she intends to counsel families professionally, she should handle constructive criticism from her own relatives. Elena's discomfort was visible in her nervous napkin manipulation, yet she remained silent. Maya felt the crushing weight of familiar isolation, the persistent sense that she fundamentally misunderstood something obvious to everyone else. Her academic training confirmed that functional families didn't operate this way, yet she remained unable to decipher her own household's toxic patterns. Conversation eventually resumed, leaving Maya to internalize her pain and maintain composure. During dessert, she successfully presented the anniversary gift, witnessing her parents' authentic enthusiasm as they examined the DNA kit. Roberto appeared particularly fascinated by genealogical possibilities, while Elena excitedly discussed potential connections with distant relatives. "Such a thoughtful gesture, mija," Roberto said warmly, momentarily providing Maya the belonging she craved. "We'll explore this together as a complete family." Carmen studied the kit with obvious skepticism. "Fascinating selection, Maya. Though it seems characteristic. You've always been preoccupied with understanding your origins." Her tone carried implications Maya couldn't decipher before Carmen shifted toward vacation planning with David. Later, nestled against David's chest in her apartment, Maya struggled to process the evening's emotional turbulence. While her gift had been appreciated and her parents seemed genuinely excited about their ancestry project, Carmen's words continued to sting with surgical accuracy. "She identifies my exact vulnerabilities," Maya whispered. "It's as if she's mapped my weaknesses and engineered specific weapons to exploit them. Healthy siblings don't function this way." David's embrace tightened protectively.
Absolutely not. There's something profound beneath her hostility, Maya. Her expression when she looks at you, it transcends sibling rivalry. She harbors anger about something specific that you're unaware of. As sleep approached, David's observation lingered in Maya's thoughts. Something she unknowingly represented, something Carmen couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge. The DNA kit waited innocently on her dresser, soon to reveal family secrets that would transform every cruel word, dismissive glance, and moment of alienation into comprehensible context. 3 weeks had passed since the anniversary dinner, and Maya sat hunched over her laptop in the corner booth of her favorite coffee shop, ostensibly reviewing notes for her thesis defense, but actually obsessing over the email notification that had arrived that morning. The DNA results were ready. Her finger hovered over the link, torn between excitement and an inexplicable sense of dread that had been building since she'd first submitted the samples. The coffee shop's familiar ambient noise, grinding espresso machines, muffled conversations, clinking ceramic, usually provided the perfect backdrop for concentration. Today, however, Maya found herself hyper-aware of every sound, her nervous system seemingly calibrated to detect anything that might distract her from the moment of truth waiting in her inbox. She clicked the link. The ancestry composition loaded first, revealing the expected mix of Mexican and European heritage that aligned with family stories she'd grown up hearing. Nothing surprising there. Roberto's tales of his grandmother's Spanish ancestry and Elena's pride in her indigenous roots were confirmed in neat percentage breakdowns. Maya scrolled through the regional specifics, finding comfort in the familiar narrative of her family's origins. Then she reached the DNA matches section, and her world tilted sideways. The interface displayed her closest genetic connections in descending order of shared DNA. Her parents appeared exactly as expected, Roberto Rodriguez and Elena Rodriguez, each showing the anticipated 50% genetic overlap that confirmed their biological relationship to her. But the third entry made her stomach lurch with confusion. Carmen Vasquez was listed as her half-aunt. Not sister, not half-sister, half-aunt. Maya stared at the screen until the words blurred, convinced she was misreading the relationship designation. She refreshed the page 3 times, each reload confirming the impossible information. According to the genetic analysis, Carmen shared only 12.5% of Maya's DNA, the precise amount expected between an aunt and niece, not the 50% that should exist between full siblings, or even the 25% typical of half-siblings. Her hands trembling slightly, Maya grabbed her phone and dialed the testing company's customer service line. The hold music, cheerful and optimistic, felt mockingly inappropriate as she waited for someone to explain what had to be a catastrophic database error.
Ancestry Genetics Customer Service, this is Jennifer. How can I help you today?
I received my DNA results this morning, and there's obviously been a mistake. My sister is showing up as my half-aunt, which is genetically impossible. Jennifer's voice remained professionally pleasant.
I understand your confusion. Let me pull up your account and review the analysis. Can you provide your kit number?
Maya rattled off the digits, listening to keyboard clicks as Jennifer accessed her file. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. Ms. Rodriguez, I've reviewed your results and I can confirm that our analysis is accurate. The genetic markers clearly indicate a half-aunt relationship with the individual listed as Carmen Vasquez. This means you share one grandparent, specifically that one of your parents is a full sibling to one of her parents. The clinical explanation hit Maya like cold water. That's impossible. Carmen is my sister. We grew up in the same house with the same parents. I understand this information can be surprising, Jennifer continued gently. Our genetic analysis is extremely precise, with less than a 0.01% margin of error. If you believed this person to be your sister, there may be family history you weren't previously aware of. Maya ended the call with shaking hands, her mind racing through the implications. If Carmen was her half-aunt, then either Roberto or Elena had a sibling Maya had never heard of, a sibling who was Carmen's biological parent. The pieces began arranging themselves in disturbing patterns. She opened her laptop's browser and began researching the other DNA matches, diving into the genetic genealogy rabbit hole with the desperate focus of someone seeking rational explanation for an impossible situation. The more she investigated, the more the evidence mounted. Several DNA connections appeared on branches of her family tree that had never been mentioned in family stories. Names like Maria V. and Carlos Vasquez showed up repeatedly as shared matches between her and Carmen, suggesting an entire family line that had been systematically excluded from Maya's understanding of her heritage. Maya's academic training kicked in. The methodical research skills she'd developed for her thesis defense now applied to unraveling her own family mystery. She created spreadsheets tracking genetic relationships, cross-referenced shared matches, and began constructing a family tree that bore little resemblance to the narrative she'd grown up believing. The pattern that emerged was both clear and devastating. Carmen appeared to be the daughter of Roberto and someone named Maria, not Elena.
The timeline suggested that Roberto had a relationship with Maria before his marriage to Elena, and Carmen had somehow been integrated into the Rodriguez family under false pretenses. But why? And how had Elena been convinced to raise another woman's child as her own daughter? Maya's phone buzzed with a text from David. "How's the thesis prep going? Coffee later?" She stared at the innocent message, realizing she had to tell someone what she'd discovered before the weight of the secret crushed her. But even as she typed back suggesting they meet immediately, another thought crystallized with horrible clarity. Carmen had always known. The pieces fell into place with sickening precision. Carmen's inexplicable hostility, her comments about Maya being oblivious to dysfunction, her bitter remarks about family origins. Carmen had grown up knowing she wasn't really Maya's sister, knowing she was living a lie that everyone around her had accepted as truth. Her cruelty suddenly made sense as misdirected anger at a situation she couldn't control or escape. Maya closed her laptop and sat in the coffee shop's bustling environment, feeling more isolated than she had ever had in her life. Everything she thought she knew about her family was built on deception. Her parents had lied to her, possibly to Carmen as well, for her entire existence.
The foundation of her identity, already shaky from years of feeling like an outsider in her own home, had just crumbled completely. As she gathered her belongings with numb fingers, Maya realized that confronting this truth would require her to become someone she'd never been before, someone willing to shatter comfortable illusions in pursuit of authentic understanding. The DNA test, intended as a bonding gift for her parents' anniversary, had instead revealed that her family's bonds were more fragile and complex than she'd ever imagined. The walk to her car felt surreal, as if she were moving through someone else's life. Carmen wasn't her sister. Her parents had lied to her for 22 years. And somewhere in Phoenix lived a woman named Maria who held pieces of the truth that could explain everything, or destroy what remained of Maya's sense of family entirely. Maya's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as she pulled into the parking garage beneath Carmen's downtown Phoenix marketing firm. 2 days had passed since the DNA revelation. 2 sleepless nights spent rehearsing this conversation and trying to predict Carmen's reaction. The glass and steel building towered above her, its corporate elegance a perfect reflection of Carmen's carefully curated professional image. Successful, untouchable, completely in control. The elevator ride to the 14th floor felt interminable. Maya clutched a manila folder containing printed copies of the DNA results, her evidence carefully organized like a legal brief. Her reflection in the polished elevator doors showed someone she barely recognized. Pale, hollow-eyed, transformed by the weight of family secrets that had been festering for decades. Carmen's assistant, a perfectly groomed young man named Trevor, looked up from his desk with practiced professionalism. "Maya, what a surprise. Carmen's between meetings if you'd like to see her." "Please," Maya managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Tell her it's important." Through the glass walls of Carmen's corner office, Maya could see her sister, half-aunt, she corrected herself with a mental wince, finishing a phone call. Carmen looked every inch the successful marketing executive, in her tailored charcoal suit, her dark hair pulled back severely, her expression focused and authoritative. For a moment, Maya hesitated. This woman had built an impressive life, commanded respect in her field, projected confidence and competence. Was Maya about to destroy all of that with her folder of genetic evidence? Carmen gestured her in with a wave, ending her call with crisp efficiency. "Maya, what brings you to my office? You look terrible, by the way. Are you sleeping?" The casual cruelty in the observation, delivered as if it were helpful rather than hurtful, reminded Maya exactly why she was here. She closed the office door behind her and took the seat across from Carmen's imposing desk, the folder trembling slightly in her hands. "We need to talk about our family," Maya began, watching Carmen's expression carefully. "About our relationship, specifically." Carmen leaned back in her leather chair,
her eyebrows raising with what looked like genuine curiosity mixed with wariness. "What about our relationship? Has David been coaching you to stand up for yourself? Because honestly, Maya, if you're here to relitigate every childhood disagreement—" "You're not my sister," Maya interrupted, the words falling between them like stones. "According to DNA analysis, you're my half-aunt."
The change in Carmen's expression was instantaneous and devastating. The color drained from her face, her carefully constructed mask of professional competence cracking to reveal something raw and vulnerable underneath. For several seconds, she said nothing, just stared at Maya with an expression that looked almost like relief mixed with terror. "That's impossible," Carmen finally whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "We grew up in the same house. We have the same parents." Maya opened the folder and slid the printed results across the desk. Carmen's hands shook as she picked up the papers, her eyes scanning the genetic percentages and relationship predictions. Maya watched her sister's aunt's face crumble as she absorbed the scientific confirmation of what some part of her had apparently always known. "How long have you suspected?" Maya asked gently, her anger temporarily replaced by compassion as she witnessed Carmen's genuine anguish. Carmen set the papers down with deliberate care, as if they might explode. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Always," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "Not the specifics, but I always knew something was wrong. I never felt like I belonged, never understood why Elena looked at me sometimes, like she was trying to solve a puzzle." The admission hung between them. 28 years of carefully buried truth finally surfacing. Maya felt her own eyes fill with tears as she began to understand the depth of Carmen's pain, growing up in a family where she was living a lie that everyone around her had agreed to maintain. "Is that why you hated me?" Maya asked, surprised by how much the question hurt to voice. "Because I represented everything you felt you were denied?" Carmen's laugh was bitter and self-aware. "I didn't hate you, Maya. I hated what you represented. You were the legitimate daughter, the one who belonged without question, who never had to wonder if your place in the family was secure. I spent my entire childhood feeling like an imposter, like someone who was being tolerated rather than truly loved." The words poured out of Carmen like water from a broken dam, years of suppressed resentment and confusion finally finding voice. She described feeling like an outsider at family gatherings, noticing subtle differences in how she was treated versus Maya, sensing undercurrents of tension she couldn't understand or address. "I took my anger out on you because you were safe," Carmen continued, her professional composure completely abandoned. "I couldn't attack Mom and Dad without risking the only stability I'd ever known. But you were stuck with me either way. I could hurt you without losing my place in the family." Maya absorbed this explanation with a mixture of heartbreak and validation. The cruelty that had shaped her childhood finally made sense, even as it remained inexcusable. Carmen hadn't been a naturally vindictive person. She'd been a frightened child, acting out her own trauma and displacement. "Do you know who your real parents are? The DNA results show connections to people named Maria and Carlos Vasquez."
Carmen nodded slowly. "Maria is my biological mother. I remember her from when I was very young, before Dad brought me to live with your family. I always assumed she was a relative or family friend. No one ever explained the real relationship." "What happened to her?" "I don't know," Carmen admitted. "Dad made it clear that asking questions about my life before joining your family was off limits. I learned early that bringing up Maria or my early memories made everyone uncomfortable, so I stopped asking." They sat in silence for several minutes, both processing the magnitude of the deception that had shaped their lives. Maya realized that Carmen had been as much a victim of their parents' lies as she had been, perhaps more so, since Carmen had lived with the conscious knowledge that something fundamental about her place in the family was false. "We need to confront them," Maya said finally.
We need the whole truth about what happened and why they decided to build our family on this lie." Carmen's expression hardened slightly, her protective instincts reasserting themselves. "Maya, think about what you're asking. If we force this conversation, we could destroy everything. Mom and Dad's marriage, our family structure, everyone's sense of security." "Our family structure is already built on lies," Maya replied firmly, "and their marriage is based on a deception that's been eating away at all of us for decades. Don't you want to know the truth? Don't you want to understand why you felt like an outsider your entire life?" Carmen stared out her office window at the Phoenix skyline, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. When she turned back to Maya, her expression held a combination of fear and determination that Maya had never seen before. "Yes," she said quietly, "I want to know the truth, even if it destroys everything we thought we knew about our family." Maya reached across the desk and took Carmen's hand, the first genuinely affectionate contact they had shared in years. "Then we'll find it together." The following Saturday morning found Maya and Carmen driving through Roberto's old neighborhood in South Phoenix, an area that bore little resemblance to the affluent community where Maya had grown up. Carmen navigated the unfamiliar streets with GPS assistance, while Maya studied a handwritten list of addresses they'd compiled through online research and public records. The contrast between their current mission and their usual interactions felt surreal. For the first time in their lives, they were united in purpose, rather than locked in conflict. "Turn left here," Maya instructed, checking her notes.
Mrs. Hernandez at 2847 should remember Dad from when he lived on Maple Street in the early 90s. Carmen pulled up to a modest stucco house with a well-maintained front yard where an elderly woman was tending to her roses. They'd decided that Maya should take the lead in these conversations, her social work training making her naturally better at drawing information from strangers. Carmen's direct approach, while effective in business, might seem too aggressive for the delicate work of extracting decades-old neighborhood memories. "Mrs. Hernandez?" Maya called out as they approached the fence. "I'm Maya Rodriguez, Roberto Rodriguez's daughter. I was hoping you might remember my father from when he lived in this neighborhood." The woman looked up from her roses, her weathered face brightening with recognition. "Roberto Rodriguez? Of course I remember him. Such a handsome young man. He lived with his parents on Maple Street until he got that girl pregnant." She paused, studying Maya's face. "You must be Elena's daughter. You have her eyes." Maya exchanged a quick glance with Carmen before responding. "Actually, we're trying to learn more about that time in his life. Do you remember the girl he got pregnant?" Mrs. Hernandez set down her gardening shears and moved closer to the fence, clearly pleased to have an audience for old neighborhood gossip. "Maria Vasquez. Sweet girl, but too young to handle Roberto's wildness. He was always going to leave this neighborhood behind. You could see it in his eyes. When Maria told him about the baby, he disappeared for months, left her to deal with everything alone." Carmen stepped forward, her voice carefully controlled. "Do you remember what happened to Maria and the baby?" "Oh, that poor child," Mrs. Hernandez said, shaking her head sadly. "Maria struggled so much after Roberto left. Single mother, working 2 jobs, barely keeping their little apartment on Cedar Street. The baby, a beautiful little girl with her father's eyes, spent more time with neighbors than with her own mother, because Maria was always working." Maya felt her heart constrict as she realized they were hearing about Carmen's childhood from an outside perspective. She glanced at her sister, noting the rigid way Carmen held herself, as if bracing against painful memories. "What happened when Roberto came back?" Maya asked gently. "That was years later," Mrs. Hernandez continued. "Maybe when the girl was 12 or 13. By then, Roberto looked completely different. Expensive clothes, nice car, obviously doing well for himself. He showed up one day and took the girl away. Maria was devastated, but what could she do? He was the father, and he could provide things she never could." The woman's account painted a picture that aligned with their DNA discoveries, but filled in crucial emotional details. Roberto hadn't abandoned his first family out of malice. He'd fled from responsibility as a young man, only to return years later when guilt or circumstance forced him to acknowledge his daughter. Their next stop was Cedar Street, where they hoped to find someone who remembered Maria and young Carmen directly. The apartment building Mrs. Hernandez had mentioned was still standing, though it showed obvious signs of age and financial struggle. Maya knocked on several doors before finding Mrs. Torres,
a middle-aged woman who had lived in the building for over 20 years. "I remember Maria," Mrs. Torres said, inviting them into her small but immaculately clean living room. "She was already struggling when I moved in, but you could tell she loved that little girl fiercely. Carmen was her whole world, even when Maria was working herself to death trying to provide for her." Carmen spoke for the first time in hours. "What was she like? As a child, I mean." Mrs. Torres studied Carmen's face with growing recognition. "You're Carmen, aren't you? You have the same eyes, the same way of holding your head when you're thinking. You were such a serious child, always watching everything, always trying to take care of your mother even when you were too young to understand what was happening." The recognition clearly shook Carmen, connecting her to memories she'd either suppressed or been too young to fully process. Maya watched her sister struggle with the revelation that her early childhood had been marked by poverty and instability rather than the comfortable family life she'd eventually joined. "Your mother used to cry at night," Mrs. Torres continued gently. "She blamed herself for not being able to give you the life she thought you deserved. When your father came back and offered to take you, she spent weeks agonizing over the decision. She wanted what was best for you, even if it meant losing you." "Did she ever explain why my father had left?" Carmen asked, her voice barely above a whisper.
Maria said he was young and scared, not ready to be a father. She never spoke badly of him, even after years of raising you alone. She always hoped he would come back and help somehow. They left Cedar Street with a much clearer picture of Carmen's early life and the circumstances that had led to Roberto's return. The afternoon was spent visiting Roberto's old friends and former co-workers, each conversation adding pieces to the puzzle of his transformation from irresponsible young man to successful businessman who felt compelled to rescue the daughter he'd abandoned. As they drove back toward the city center, Carmen finally broke the silence that had stretched between them for miles. "I remember some of it now. The apartment on Cedar Street, Maria working late shifts, feeling hungry more often than I should have. I remember being confused when Dad showed up and told me I was going to live with a new family." Maya reached over and squeezed Carmen's hand. "I can't imagine how terrifying that must have been. A 12-year-old being moved into a completely different life without any explanation." "The worst part was that everyone acted like it was normal," Carmen continued. "Like I'd always been part of the Rodriguez family. Like my memories of life before were somehow wrong or unimportant. I learned to stop asking questions because they made everyone uncomfortable." Their investigation had revealed the basic timeline. Roberto had abandoned pregnant Maria in his early 20s, built a new life with Elena, then returned years later to claim Carmen when she was old enough that the disruption to his marriage could be minimized. But crucial questions remained unanswered. How had Roberto convinced Elena to accept Carmen as family? What story had he told to explain his sudden acquisition of a 12-year-old daughter? And most importantly, did Elena know the truth about Carmen's parentage? Or was she as much a victim of Roberto's deception as everyone else? "Tomorrow we confront them," Maya said as they pulled into Carmen's office parking garage. "We have enough information now to demand the complete truth." Carmen nodded, her expression grim but determined. "No more lies. No more pretending that our family is something it's not." As Maya drove home that evening, she reflected on the strange intimacy that had developed between her and Carmen over the course of their investigation. For the first time in their lives, they were truly sisters, united in their determination to understand the deception that had shaped both their childhoods and driven a wedge between them for decades. Sunday evening arrived with the weight of inevitability. Maya and Carmen had agreed to meet at the family home during what should have been a peaceful dinner, their evidence carefully organized in a folder that felt like carrying dynamite. As Maya pulled into the familiar driveway, she noticed Carmen's car already there, and through the dining room windows, she could see the warm glow of Elena's candles illuminating what would likely be their last family meal built on comfortable lies. The house smelled of Elena's famous enchiladas and fresh tortillas, scents that had always meant safety and belonging to Maya. Tonight,
They felt like a mockery of the authenticity she'd always craved from her family. Roberto's booming laughter echoed from the kitchen, where he was undoubtedly telling Elena some story from his week, playing the role of devoted husband and father with the same skill he'd apparently been using for decades. "Maya, Carmen, perfect timing," Elena called out as they entered together, an unusual sight that would have normally prompted comment. "Dinner's almost ready. Your father just opened that wine you brought last month, Carmen." Roberto emerged from the kitchen carrying a bottle and glasses, his face lighting up with genuine pleasure at seeing both his daughters together.
The cruel irony wasn't lost on Maya. Roberto's obvious joy at their rare unity was about to be destroyed by their shared mission to expose his deception. "This is wonderful," Roberto said, beginning to pour wine. "My two favorite girls actually getting along for once. What's the occasion?" Carmen and Maya exchanged a look heavy with shared purpose. They'd rehearsed this moment, but the reality of Roberto's unsuspecting happiness made Maya's stomach churn with anticipated devastation. "Actually, Dad, we need to talk to you and Mom about something important," Maya said, her voice steadier than she felt. "It's about our family history." Elena looked up from arranging serving dishes, her maternal instincts apparently detecting the undercurrent of tension. "Is everything all right? You both look so serious." Carmen pulled out the folder they'd prepared, her business training taking over, as she organized the materials with clinical precision. "We've discovered some information about our family that doesn't match what we've always been told." Roberto's hand froze mid-pour, wine splashing slightly on the tablecloth, a small but telling sign of his sudden nervousness. His eyes darted between his daughters and the folder, and Maya saw the exact moment when he realized their comfortable charade was about to crumble. "What kind of information?" Roberto asked carefully, setting down the wine bottle with hands that trembled, almost imperceptibly. Maya opened the folder and placed the DNA results on the table where both parents could see them. "According to genetic analysis, Carmen and I aren't sisters. We're half aunt and niece, which means one of you has a sibling who's Carmen's biological parent." The silence that followed was deafening. Elena's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, dawning horror, as she processed the implications. Roberto's reaction was more immediate and devastating. He seemed to collapse inward, his shoulders sagging as 26 years of carefully maintained lies finally caught up with him. "That's impossible," Elena whispered, reaching for the papers with shaking hands. "Carmen is your sister. She's been part of our family since she was 12. Roberto, tell them this is some kind of mistake." Roberto's silence stretched uncomfortably long before he finally spoke, his voice barely audible. "It's not a mistake." Elena's sharp intake of breath filled the room. "What do you mean it's not a mistake? Roberto, what are you saying?" The confession poured out of Roberto like water from a broken dam, 26 years of secrets spilling across their dining room table. He told them about Maria Vasquez, about abandoning her when she was pregnant, about building a new life with Elena while his first daughter grew up in poverty. He described the phone call from social services when Maria's addiction made it impossible for her to care for Carmen, and his decision to bring Carmen into their family without revealing her true identity. "I told you she was my orphaned niece," Roberto said to Elena, his voice breaking. "I couldn't bear to tell you the truth, that I'd abandoned my own child and left her to struggle while I built this perfect life with you." Elena's face had gone completely white, her hands gripping the edge of the table as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. "You mean I've been raising your biological daughter? For 14 years, I've been mothering your child while thinking I was being generous to some distant relative?" "Elena, please. Please what?" Elena's voice was rising, years of suppressed confusion finally finding outlet. "Please understand why you lied to me for over 2 decades? Please forgive you for making me complicit in a deception I never consented to?" Carmen spoke for the first time since the revelation began, her voice cutting through the emotional chaos with surgical precision. "What about me, Dad?
What about the 12 years I spent wondering why I felt like an outsider in this family? Do you have any idea what it's like to grow up feeling like you don't belong? Like everyone around you is keeping secrets you're not allowed to know? Roberto turned to Carmen with tears streaming down his face. I thought I was protecting you. I thought if we could all just be a normal family, if we could forget about the past. Forget about the past? Carmen's composure finally cracked. I never forgot, Dad. I remembered Maria. I remembered being poor. I remembered feeling scared and confused when you suddenly appeared and told me I had to live with strangers. I spent my entire childhood wondering what was wrong with me that made my new family treat me differently. Maya watched this exchange with growing understanding of how Roberto's cowardice had poisoned every relationship in their family. His inability to tell the truth had created Carmen's misplaced anger, Elena's confusion about family dynamics, and Maya's lifelong sense of being an outsider in her own home. I was trying to give Carmen a better life, Roberto protested weakly. Maria couldn't take care of her anymore. You thought you could rewrite history, Elena interrupted, her voice now cold with fury. You thought you could lie to everyone, including your own wife, and somehow that would make everything work out perfectly. The family dinner they'd planned lay forgotten on the kitchen counter as 26 years of dysfunction finally made sense. Every uncomfortable family moment, every inexplicable tension, every cruel word Carmen had directed at Maya could now be traced back to Roberto's original deception and his continued refusal to address the truth. Get out, Elena said quietly, her voice carrying absolute finality. Roberto, I want you out of this house tonight. I need time to process what you've done to all of us. Roberto looked around the table at the three women whose lives he'd shaped with his lies, seeing perhaps for the first time the full scope of the damage his choices had caused. Without another word, he left the dining room, and minutes later they heard the front door close behind him.
In the silence that followed, Elena, Maya, and Carmen sat amid the wreckage of their family's foundation, finally free to begin building something authentic from the ruins of Roberto's deception. The week following Roberto's departure felt like living in a house made of glass, everything transparent now, but fragile enough to shatter at the slightest touch. Maya found herself unable to concentrate on her thesis defense preparation, the academic concepts of family systems therapy taking on painful personal relevance as she watched her own family navigate the aftermath of their explosive revelation. Elena had taken 3 days off work, something she hadn't done in Maya's memory except for genuine illness. Maya would find her mother sitting in the living room at odd hours, staring at family photographs with an expression of profound bewilderment, as if trying to decode hidden messages in images she'd looked at thousands of times before. The pictures that had once represented happy family memories now served as evidence of an elaborate deception. Every smile hiding secrets, every group pose carefully arranged to maintain Roberto's fiction. I keep thinking about all the times Carmen seemed different, Elena said during one of these photo sessions, Maya sitting beside her on the couch they'd shared for countless movie nights. The way she'd go quiet during family stories, how she never seemed to have memories from before age 12. I thought she was just a private child, maybe traumatized by losing her parents in that car accident your father described. Maya's heart ached at the casual reference to Roberto's fabricated tragedy. What exactly did he tell you about Carmen's background? Elena's laugh was bitter and self-aware. That she was his brother's daughter, orphaned when her parents died in Mexico. He said bringing her to live with us was his family obligation, his way of honoring his brother's memory. I was so proud of him for stepping up, for being the kind of man who would take responsibility for a grieving child. The manipulation was breathtaking in its thoroughness. Roberto hadn't simply lied about Carmen's parentage, he'd created an entire fictional narrative that cast himself as the hero while erasing Carmen's real mother and early childhood entirely. Maya wondered how many other family stories were similarly constructed to protect Roberto's image while isolating everyone else from the truth.
Carmen had thrown herself into work with manic intensity, staying at her office until nearly midnight every day and responding to texts with single-word answers that discouraged further conversation. When Maya finally confronted her sister, Aunt, at her apartment Thursday evening, she found Carmen surrounded by takeout containers and financial documents, apparently reorganizing her entire life with the same methodical precision she applied to marketing campaigns. "I've been thinking about moving," Carmen announced without preamble, not looking up from her laptop screen. "Maybe relocating to another city entirely. Start fresh somewhere without the weight of all these lies." Maya settled onto Carmen's pristine white couch, noting how different her sister's living space was from the warm, cluttered family home they'd both grown up in. Everything here was carefully curated, beautiful, but somehow sterile, as if Carmen had been practicing for a life of independence long before she consciously realized she might need it. Running away won't change what happened, and it won't help us figure out how to move forward as a family. Carmen finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed from staring at screens and lack of sleep. "What family, Maya? The family built on Dad's lies? The family where I spent 16 years being cruel to my own niece because I was too angry and confused to understand what was really happening?" The pain in Carmen's voice was raw and immediate, years of suppressed guilt finally finding expression. I realized that Carmen's cruelty hadn't just been misdirected anger. It had been the desperate acting out of someone living a lie they couldn't articulate or escape. "You were a child dealing with trauma and displacement. You didn't have the tools to process what was happening to you, and the adults in your life failed to give you the truth you needed to make sense of your situation." "That doesn't excuse how I treated you," Carmen said, her voice breaking slightly.
I made your childhood miserable because I couldn't handle my own confusion and anger. You were innocent, Maya. You were just a little girl who wanted her sister to love her, and I was too damaged to give you what you needed. This admission hung between them, 22 years of hurt and confusion finally being acknowledged and contextualized. Maya felt tears gathering as she recognized the profound tragedy of their situation. Two people who should have been allies against the dysfunction around them, instead becoming victims of the same deception that pitted them against each other. David had become Maya's anchor during this chaotic week, offering practical support like grocery shopping and thesis editing, while also providing the emotional stability she desperately needed. His own family background, Korean-American parents who valued direct communication and emotional honesty, served as a constant reminder that functional families actually existed, that the Rodriguez dysfunction wasn't normal or inevitable. "Your family's foundation was built on lies," David said as they walked through the desert botanical garden that Saturday afternoon, seeking peace among the towering saguaros and blooming desert wildflowers. "But that doesn't mean you can't build something authentic from what's left." Maya paused beside a particularly majestic saguaro, its arms reaching toward the cloudless Arizona sky with patient endurance. "I don't even know what authentic would look like at this point. Everything I thought I knew about our family relationships was wrong." "Not everything," David replied, taking her hand. "Your mother's love for both you and Carmen is real, even if it was manipulated by your father's lies. Carmen's pain is real, and so is her growing desire to make amends. Your own capacity for forgiveness and understanding, that's real too." As they continued their walk, Maya began to envision a different kind of family structure, one built on choice rather than obligation, honesty rather than comfortable fiction. It would require Alina to process her betrayal and decide whether she could forgive Roberto's deception. It would demand that Carmen work through decades of displacement and anger while learning to trust again. And it would challenge Maya to redefine what family meant when the traditional roles and relationships had been revealed as fraudulent. By the time they reached David's car, Maya had made a decision that surprised her with its clarity. Tomorrow, she would call Dr. Sarah Chen, a family therapist she'd studied under during her graduate program. If they were going to rebuild their family on authentic foundations, they would need professional guidance to navigate the complex emotional terrain ahead.
The lies that had defined their family for decades were finally exposed, but the hard work of healing and reconstruction was just beginning. Dr. Sarah Chen's office felt like a sanctuary compared to the emotional minefield Maya's family home had become. Located in a converted adobe house in central Phoenix, the space radiated calm professionalism while maintaining warmth through carefully chosen southwestern art and comfortable seating arrangements. Maya arrived 15 minutes early for their first family session, her nervous energy making it impossible to sit still as she waited for Alina and Carmen to join her. Alina entered next, looking older than Maya had ever seen her. The past 2 weeks had etched new lines around her eyes, and her usually impeccable appearance showed signs of the emotional chaos she'd been processing. She wore a simple blue dress that Maya recognized as one of her mother's favorites, but it hung differently now, as if Alina herself had somehow diminished in the wake of Roberto's revelations. Carmen arrived precisely on time, her professional armor firmly in place, despite the vulnerability of their circumstances. She'd chosen a tailored black pantsuit that projected competence and control, but Maya noticed the way her sister's hands trembled slightly as she set down her purse and selected a chair positioned strategically between Maya and Alina, close enough to participate, far enough to escape if necessary. Dr. Chen entered with a presence that immediately shifted the room's energy toward healing possibility. Maya had worked with her during graduate school clinical rotations and knew her reputation for gentle but incisive work with family systems. Her Korean-American heritage and immigrant family background gave her particular insight into the complexities of family secrets and cultural expectations that could poison relationships across generations. Thank you all for coming.
Chen began, settling into her chair with practiced ease. Maya has shared some basic information about your family's recent discoveries, but I'd like each of you to describe your experience of these revelations in your own words. Elena, would you like to start? Elena's hands clasped and unclasped in her lap as she struggled to find words adequate to her experience. I feel like I've been living someone else's life for 26 years, she said finally. Every decision I made about our family, every sacrifice, every moment of confusion about why Carmen seemed to resent Maya, it all makes sense now, but in the most devastating way possible. Her voice strengthened as she continued, anger beginning to emerge alongside the hurt. I raised Roberto's biological daughter while believing I was being generous to a distant relative. I watched Carmen struggle with feelings I couldn't understand, while Maya suffered from cruelty that seemed to come from nowhere. Roberto robbed all of us of the chance to have authentic relationships based on truth. Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. Elena, it sounds like you're processing both personal betrayal and systemic deception. How are you managing the complexity of those feelings? I don't know, Elena admitted. Part of me wants to forgive Roberto because I understand you was young and scared when he abandoned Carmen and Maria, but another part of me is furious that he made me complicit in a lie without my consent, that he watched our family dysfunction for decades without having the courage to tell the truth. Carmen shifted uncomfortably when Elena mentioned her mother, and Dr. Chen's trained eye caught the movement immediately. Carmen, what's it like to hear Elena process her experience of raising you? Confusing, Carmen replied, her professional composure cracking slightly. On one hand, Elena gave me stability and opportunities I never would have had with Maria. On the other hand, knowing that her generosity was based on Roberto's lies makes me question whether any of the love I felt from this family was real, or just guilt and obligation. Maya felt her heart break at Carmen's admission, recognizing the deep insecurity that had driven years of hostile behavior. Carmen, Elena's love for you was real, even if it was built on false information. You were 12 years old and needed a mother. Elena stepped into that role regardless of what Roberto told her about your background. But would she have been as patient with my anger and confusion if she'd known I was Roberto's biological daughter rather than an orphaned niece? Carmen challenged.
Would she have tolerated my treatment of Maya if she'd understood that my cruelty came from feeling displaced rather than grieving strangers I'd never actually lost? Elena leaned forward, her voice firm despite her emotional exhaustion. Carmen, I would have loved you exactly the same. If anything, knowing the truth would have helped me understand your pain and give you the support you actually needed, instead of trying to help you grieve fictional parents.
Chen observed this exchange with professional interest before redirecting their focus. What I'm hearing is that Roberto's deception created a system where everyone was operating with incomplete information, leading to misunderstandings and misdirected emotions. Carmen, your anger at feeling displaced was justified, but it got directed toward Maya instead of the situation itself. Elena, your confusion about family dynamics was natural, given the false narrative you'd been given. She paused, allowing the insight to settle before continuing. Maya, you've been relatively quiet. How are you processing your role in this family system? Maya had been dreading this question, knowing it would require her to examine her own complicity in perpetuating family dysfunction. I think I spent so much energy trying to understand why Carmen hated me that I never questioned the fundamental assumptions about our family structure. I accepted that Carmen was my sister without ever really examining whether that relationship felt authentic or natural. And now? Dr. Chen prompted gently. Now I realize that our relationship makes more sense as aunt and niece, Maya admitted. The age gap, the different way Carmen related to our parents, even the way she seemed to see me as competition for family resources rather than a natural ally. It all fits better when I understand the real dynamics. Carmen's eyes filled with tears at this observation. I'm so sorry, Maya. I robbed you of having a real sister because I was too confused and angry to be the aunt you needed. You were dealing with your own trauma, Maya replied, reaching across the space between their chairs to take Carmen's hand. We were both victims of Roberto's inability to tell the truth about our family structure. Dr. Chen watched this moment of connection with professional satisfaction before addressing the broader implications. What I want you all to understand is that families can heal from deception, but it requires commitment to radical honesty going forward. Elena, you'll need to decide whether you can forgive Roberto while still holding him accountable for the harm his lies caused. Carmen and Maya, you'll need to develop a new relationship based on your actual roles rather than the fiction you've been living. The session continued for another 40 minutes, establishing ground rules for honest communication and beginning the process of examining how each family member could contribute to building something authentic from the ruins of Roberto's deception. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Chen gave them homework assignments designed to practice direct communication while processing their individual trauma. Walking to their cars in the parking lot, the three women felt simultaneously exhausted and hopeful. The work ahead would be difficult and painful, but for the first time in any of their memories, they were operating with complete information about their family structure and dynamics. Same time next week? Elena asked, and both Maya and Carmen nodded their agreement. They were finally ready to build a family based on truth rather than comfortable lies, regardless of how much courage that construction would require. The address Maya had found for Maria Vasquez led them to a modest apartment complex in South Phoenix, where desert landscaping struggled against the relentless Arizona sun, and chain-link fences separated small patios from narrow sidewalks. Carmen sat in the passenger seat of Maya's Honda, gripping a manila folder containing copies of the DNA results and family photographs, her usual professional confidence replaced by the nervous energy of someone about to confront their deepest childhood memories. Are you sure you want to do this? Maya asked as they pulled into the visitor parking space. 3 weeks had passed since their first therapy session, and Dr. Chen had encouraged them to seek out Maria's perspective on the family history that had shaped all their lives. We could wait, process more with Dr. Chen before... No, Carmen interrupted, her voice steadier than her hands. I need to understand what happened from her perspective. I need to know why Roberto left us, why he came back, and what she went through during those years I can barely remember. They climbed 2 flights of stairs to apartment 2C,
passing children's bicycles, and the lingering scent of evening cooking that reminded Maya of her grandmother's house, cumin and chile and corn tortillas warming on gas flames. Carmen knocked softly, and they heard movement inside before the door opened to reveal a woman in her mid-40s whose resemblance to Carmen was unmistakable despite the toll that years of struggle had clearly taken. Maria Vázquez was smaller than Maya had expected, her dark hair streaked with premature gray and her brown eyes holding the wariness of someone who had learned to expect disappointment. She wore simple jeans and a faded blue sweater, and when she saw Carmen, her expression shifted through surprise, recognition, and something that looked almost like grief. "Carmen," Maria said softly, her voice carrying an accent that placed her childhood in Sonora. "You look so much like your father when he was young." Her gaze moved to Maya, and the warmth in her expression cooled noticeably. "And you must be Roberto's other daughter, the legitimate one." The words stung, but Maya recognized the pain behind them. Decades of bitterness at being abandoned while Roberto built a respectable family with another woman. "Ms. Vasquez, I know this is unexpected, but we were hoping you could help us understand what happened when Carmen was young. We've recently learned the truth about our family relationships, and there are still pieces missing." Maria stepped aside to let them enter, her small living room, neat but sparse, furnished with items that looked functional rather than chosen for beauty. Family photographs lined a bookshelf, and Maya could see younger versions of Carmen in several frames. A serious-faced child with Roberto's distinctive eyebrows and Maria's determined chin. "So, you finally know," Maria said, settling into a worn armchair while Maya and Carmen took the couch. "Roberto finally told the truth about who Carmen really is." Carmen leaned forward, her voice almost pleading. "I remember some things about living here with you, but Roberto made it clear that asking questions about my early life was off limits. I need to understand what happened, why he left, why he came back." Maria's expression softened as she looked at Carmen, maternal love breaking through years of defensive bitterness. "Mija, you were so young when he left, barely 5 years old. Roberto was 22, I was 19, and we thought we knew everything about love and life." She laughed, but the sound held no humor. "He panicked when I told him I was pregnant, said he wasn't ready to be a father, that he had plans for college and business success that didn't include a baby." "So he just left?" Maya asked, trying to understand the man she'd thought he knew.
"He disappeared one night after we had a fight about money and responsibility," Maria continued. "Left me to figure out how to raise a baby on my own while working 2 jobs and finishing high school. For years, I told Carmen that her daddy had gone away to work, but would come back someday. I kept believing he would." Carmen's hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her professional composure struggling against the emotions these revelations were stirring. "What was I like? As a little girl, I mean." Maria's face transformed with genuine tenderness. "You were the most serious child, always watching everything, always trying to help even when you were too small to be useful. You'd stand on a chair to help me cook, fold washcloths when I did laundry, read to yourself when I had to work late shifts. Too responsible for such a little girl." Maya felt tears gathering as she imagined Carmen as a 5-year-old trying to take care of her struggling mother, developing the hypervigilance and control issues that had shaped her adult personality. The image contrasted sharply with Maya's own childhood memories of security and comfort, highlighting the vast differences in their early experiences. "When did Roberto come back?" Carmen asked. Maria's expression hardened again. "When you were 12. Social services had gotten involved because I was struggling with depression and drinking too much. I wasn't a bad mother," she added defensively, "but I was overwhelmed and tired and angry. Someone reported that you were missing school, staying home to take care of me when I couldn't get out of bed." The admission hung heavy in the small room, explaining the circumstances that had forced Roberto to acknowledge his abandoned daughter. Maya realized that Carmen's removal from Maria's care hadn't been Roberto's noble rescue mission.
It had been a last resort when Maria's mental health crisis made it impossible for her to continue providing care. "What did he tell you when he came to take Carmen away?" Maya asked gently. "That he could give her opportunities I never could," Maria replied, her voice bitter with old wounds. "Private schools, college preparation, a stable family environment." How could I argue with that? I was living paycheck to paycheck in this apartment while he drove up in an expensive car wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. Carmen's voice was barely audible when she spoke. "Did you want me to go with him?" Maria reached across the space between them and took Carmen's hand, her maternal instinct overriding years of defensive distance. "Mija, letting you go was the hardest thing I've ever done. But I wanted you to have chances I couldn't give you. I wanted you to go to college, to have a career, to never worry about money the way I had to worry every single day." "But he never told his new family the truth about who I was," Carmen said, her voice breaking. "He made Elena believe I was his orphaned niece." "I spent 16 years feeling like an imposter in that house because nobody knew where I really came from." Maria's eyes flashed with anger. "He promised me he would tell them the truth eventually, when the time was right. He said it would be easier for everyone if they got used to you being part of the family first." She shook her head in disgust. "I should have known he was still the same coward who ran away when things got difficult." Maya watched this conversation unfold with growing understanding of how Roberto's deception had victimized not just his immediate family, but Maria as well. She had given up her daughter believing that Carmen would finally receive the acknowledgement and acceptance Roberto had denied them both, only to learn that her sacrifice had been built on another layer of lies. As they prepared to leave, Maria embraced Carmen with fierce protectiveness, whispering words in Spanish that Maya didn't understand but recognized as maternal blessing and apology. The visit had provided crucial context for Carmen's childhood trauma while also revealing the full scope of Roberto's pattern of abandonment and deception. Driving home through the desert evening, Carmen was quiet for long stretches before finally speaking. "I understand now why I was so angry all the time. I was grieving the mother I lost while trying to fit into a family that didn't know how to love the child I actually was." Maya reached over and squeezed her sister's hand, recognizing that their visit with Maria had been another step toward building authentic relationships based on understanding, rather than the convenient fictions that had defined their family for so long. 2 months after the DNA revelation, Maya stood in the conference room at Phoenix Children's Hospital defending her thesis on family systems therapy to a panel of professors who had no idea they were witnessing the real-time application of everything she'd learned. Her research on how family secrets create intergenerational trauma felt painfully relevant as she fielded questions about therapeutic interventions for families rebuilding after deception. Dr. Patterson, her thesis advisor, asked during the final round of questioning, "How would you handle a case where family members discover that their entire relational structure has been built on lies?" Maya took a deep breath, drawing from both her academic training and her lived experience. The key is helping family members distinguish between the relationships they thought they had and the authentic connections they can build going forward. Healing requires acknowledging the harm caused by deception, while also recognizing that love and care can exist even within dysfunctional systems. In the audience, Elena, Carmen, and David sat in the front row offering visible support for this milestone that had once seemed impossible given the chaos of their family crisis. Even Roberto had come, sitting apart from the others, but present nonetheless, a gesture that represented the tentative progress they'd been making in therapy. 3 hours later, Maya walked across the stage as Dr. Maya Rodriguez, MSW, her master's degree in hand and a job offer already accepted at a family therapy clinic specializing in adoption and kinship care. The irony wasn't lost on her that her family's dysfunction had ultimately deepened her understanding of the therapeutic work she'd chosen. The celebration dinner at Elena's house felt different from their old family gatherings, smaller, more careful, but somehow more genuine. Roberto had been gradually reintegrating into family activities over the past month, though he still maintained his own apartment and attended individual therapy twice weekly. His relationship with Elena remained fragile, built now on radical honesty rather than comfortable assumptions. "I'm proud of you, Mija," as Maya cut into Elena's Trislich's cake, the same dessert they'd shared at countless family celebrations. His voice carried genuine emotion, but also the careful tone of someone who had lost the right to casual affection and was slowly earning it back. "Your work is going to help families like ours." Carmen looked up from her own slice of cake, her relationship with family celebrations still complicated, but noticeably warmer than it had been months earlier. Maya's thesis advisor asked me to speak to her graduate students about the experience of being in adoptive placement that wasn't properly disclosed. Apparently, our situation is more common than people realize.
This was progress Maya hadn't expected. Carmen volunteering to share their family's story for educational purposes represented a level of healing and acceptance that would have been unimaginable during their childhood. Individual therapy had helped Carmen process the abandonment trauma that had fueled her childhood anger, while family sessions had taught them all new patterns of communication. "How do you feel about that?" Elena asked Carmen, her maternal protectiveness still intact despite everything they'd learned about their family structure. Elena's own therapy had focused on processing the betrayal of discovering that her marriage and motherhood had been shaped by deception, while also learning to separate Roberto's lies from her own authentic feelings for Carmen. "Nervous, but ready," Carmen admitted. "Dr. Chen thinks it might help me process the shame I still carry about how I treated Maya. If our story can help other families avoid the kind of dysfunction we lived with for so long, maybe something good can come from all the pain Roberto's lies caused." The casual reference to Roberto by his first name rather than Dad was one of many small changes that reflected their family's new dynamics. Carmen had never felt comfortable calling Roberto Dad anyway, and therapy had helped her understand that their relationship was more accurately described as something between parent and guardian, complex and caring, but not built on the natural bonds she'd tried to force herself to feel. David, who had become an unofficial family member through his steady presence during their crisis, raised his wineglass. To Maya's success, and to the courage it takes to rebuild a family on truth instead of convenient lies. They clinked glasses around Elena's dining room table, the same space where their family had exploded 2 months earlier, now serving as the foundation for something more authentic, if less traditional. Roberto sat at the end of the table instead of the head, a symbolic shift that acknowledged his reduced authority within the family structure. After dinner, Maya found herself in the kitchen with Elena, washing dishes in comfortable silence that would have been impossible during the early weeks after the revelation. Their relationship had deepened as Elena processed her own victimization by Roberto's deception and began to see Maya not just as her daughter, but as the strong young woman who had initiated their family's painful but necessary healing. "I keep thinking about the years I lost," Elena said, as she dried the serving platter that had held their celebration cake. "All the times I watched Carmen struggle with feelings I didn't understand. All the moments I could have helped her process her grief and displacement if I'd known the truth about her background." Maya paused in her scrubbing of the roasting pan, considering her mother's words. "But you loved her anyway, Mom. Even without understanding why she was hurting, you provided stability and care. That wasn't nothing." "It wasn't enough, though," Elena replied sadly. "And it came at the cost of watching her hurt you because I didn't have the information I needed to intervene effectively." In the living room, they could hear Carmen and Roberto having what sounded like a civil conversation about her career prospects and her growing interest in marketing work that focused on social justice causes. These interactions still felt careful and deliberate, lacking the natural ease of traditional parent-child relationships, but they represented genuine progress toward mutual respect and understanding. As the evening wound down and Roberto prepared to return to his apartment, he approached Maya with the hesitant demeanor of someone seeking permission for affection. "Can I hug you goodbye?" Maya nodded, allowing her father's embrace, while noting how different it felt now that she understood the full context of their family relationships. Roberto's love for her had always been genuine, but it was now complicated by his knowledge of how his lies had harmed both his daughters and his wife. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making amends for what my cowardice cost this family. I know forgiveness isn't something I can demand, but I hope someday you'll all be able to trust me again." Maya pulled back to meet his eyes, seeing genuine remorse alongside the fear of permanent estrangement. "Forgiveness is a process, Dad. We're all learning how to build something real from what's left after the lies are gone."
As Maya drove home to the apartment she now shared with David, she reflected on how much had changed since that Sunday evening when their family had imploded over DNA results and hidden truths.
They were no longer the picture-perfect family Roberto had tried to create through deception, but they were becoming something more valuable, a chosen family built on authentic relationships and honest communication. The work of forgiveness was ongoing and difficult, requiring daily choices to extend grace while maintaining healthy boundaries. But for the first time in any of their lives, the Rodriguez family was operating with complete information about their relationships, free to love each other for who they actually were, rather than the roles Roberto's lies had forced them to play. 6 months after the DNA revelation that had shattered their carefully constructed family mythology, Maya walked into the offices of Desert Family Solutions on her first day as a licensed family therapist. The morning Phoenix sun streamed through the reception area windows, illuminating inspirational quotes about healing and growth that no longer felt like empty platitudes, but rather hard-won wisdom she'd earned through her own family's painful transformation. Her office was small but welcoming, decorated with Southwestern art and furnished with comfortable chairs, arranged to facilitate honest conversation. On her desk sat a framed photograph from Carmen's housewarming party the previous month, all 4 Rodriguez family members plus David, smiling genuinely for perhaps the first time in their collective memory. The image captured something Maya had never expected to see: authentic happiness built on truth rather than performance. Carmen had moved into a charming townhouse in central Phoenix, close enough to maintain family connections, but far enough to establish the independence she'd craved since adolescence. Her own therapy had progressed remarkably, and she'd begun volunteering with local organizations that supported children in foster care. Young people who, like her, had experienced disrupted family structures and needed advocates who understood the complexity of non-traditional family arrangements. "My first client is here," Maya announced to her supervisor, Dr. Martinez, who had specifically recruited her based on her thesis work and personal experience with family reconstruction. A couple dealing with secrets about the husband's previous marriage and children he never told his current wife about. Dr. Martinez nodded with the understanding of someone who had seen how frequently family deception created therapeutic challenges. "Remember, your own experience gives you insight, but every family's path to healing is different. Trust your training." Maya's morning session proved both challenging and surprisingly fulfilling. The couple, Sarah and Michael, sat in the careful distance of people who had recently discovered that their marriage was built on incomplete information, their body language mirroring the defensive postures Maya remembered from her own family's early therapy sessions. "I feel like I've been living with a stranger," Sarah said, her voice carrying the particular hurt that comes from discovering that someone you trusted has been editing their life story. "How am I supposed to rebuild trust when I don't know what else he might be hiding?" Maya drew from both her clinical training and her personal understanding of deception's impact on family systems. "Sarah, it's natural to question everything when you discover you've been operating with incomplete information. Michael, can you help Sarah understand why you chose not to share this part of your history?" The session continued, with Maya guiding them through the same kind of difficult conversations her own family had navigated, helping them distinguish between the relationship they thought they had and the authentic connection they could build going forward. By the end of the hour, both clients looked exhausted but hopeful, the particular combination of emotions that accompanied the hard work of rebuilding relationships on honest foundations. During her lunch break, Maya drove to Roberto and Elena's house, where family dinners had resumed with new ground rules about communication and honesty. Roberto had moved back home after 3 months of separation, but their marriage now operated on explicit agreements about transparency rather than the assumptions that had previously governed their relationship. "How was your first day?" Elena asked, serving Maya a bowl of pozole that smelled like comfort and continuity despite everything that had changed about their family dynamics. Elena had returned to school herself, pursuing a certification in family mediation that would allow her to help other families navigate complex custody and kinship arrangements. "Challenging but good," Maya replied, noting how Elena's face had regained some of the peace that had been absent during the crisis months. "I worked with a couple dealing with secret children, and I kept thinking about how much pain we could have avoided if Dad had been honest from the beginning." Roberto, who was setting the table for their weekly family dinner, paused in his task. His individual therapy had helped him understand the cascading effects of his original deception, and he now spoke about his choices with ownership rather than defensiveness. I robbed all of you of the chance to love each other authentically.
Carmen arrived as they were sitting down to eat, bringing flowers from her garden and the kind of easy warmth that had been impossible during their childhood. Her relationship with each family member had been carefully reconstructed based on their actual roles rather than the fiction Roberto had created. She was Maya's aunt, who had also served as a sibling figure, Elena's stepdaughter, who had become a beloved family member, and Roberto's biological daughter learning to forgive his abandonment and deception. "I had lunch with Maria today," Carmen announced, referring to visits that had become monthly traditions. "She started taking ESL classes and might apply for citizenship. She said knowing I was okay and successful made her feel like she could finally focus on building her own life, instead of just surviving." This news represented another layer of healing, Maria's ability to move beyond the survival mode that had defined her life since Roberto's abandonment. Carmen's reconnection with her mother had been complicated but ultimately enriching, giving her access to the cultural heritage and family history that Roberto's lies had severed. David joined them for dessert, his presence now woven into their family fabric in ways that felt natural rather than performative. His steady emotional intelligence continued to serve as a model for healthy relationship dynamics, and his own family had welcomed Maya with the kind of uncomplicated acceptance she'd never experienced before. "I've been thinking about our family story," Maya said as Elena served her famous flan. "6 months ago, I thought our family was broken beyond repair. Now I realize we weren't broken, we were just built on false foundations. Everything good about our relationships was real, even when the structure holding us together was artificial." Roberto's eyes filled with tears, a reaction that had become more common as therapy helped him access emotions he'd buried for decades. "I'm grateful every day that you all chose to rebuild rather than just walk away. I know I don't deserve the forgiveness you've given me." Carmen reached across the table to squeeze his hand, a gesture that would have been impossible during their childhood but now felt natural. "We all deserved better than the lies you told, Dad, but we also deserve the chance to choose our family based on truth rather than obligation." As the evening wound down, Maya reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this point. The DNA test she'd given as an anniversary gift had destroyed the family she thought she knew, but it had also created space for authentic relationships built on understanding rather than assumption. Looking around the table at these people who had chosen to love each other despite and because of their complicated history, Maya felt something she'd never experienced before, the deep security that comes from being known completely and accepted unconditionally. Their family would never look like traditional models of success, but it was theirs, built consciously and maintained daily through the hard work of honest communication and mutual forgiveness. The truth had been painful, but it had also set them free to become the family they were meant to be, rather than the family Roberto's fears had created. In the end, that freedom was worth every difficult conversation and tear-filled therapy session that had brought them to this moment of genuine peace. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.